There are many ways to speak up for yourself and your community. One way is to become an ambassador for one of the many great organizations that serves people with disabilities. I'm Laura Bain, and for the next half hour, we'll be talking to 3 ambassadors from 4 different organizations across Canada about their roles and their experiences. We'll also hear from Rick Hansen about the important role ambassadors play in making a difference. This is Speaking Up. Bernard Aquaco is driven by his desire to help others and to become the type of disability role model he didn't see growing up. Diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa at age 2, he knew he would have to work harder than others to succeed. Today, he is a student support counselor to blind and partially sighted youth and an ambassador for CNIB and Fighting Blindness Canada, or FBC. Joining me now from his home in Brantford, Ontario is Bernard. Bernard, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I really appreciate it.
What do you do in your role as an ambassador for CNIB and for Fighting Blindness Canada?
So pretty much both the roles are pretty similar. It's all about education. I have the opportunity to go into different organizations, go into schools, businesses, and share with them my story. And not just I'm a visually impaired person. I'm a visually impaired person who likes to run, who likes to box, who likes to make music. So it just gives people who are listening to my story an opportunity to learn the person behind the visual impairment.
Absolutely. And why are those organizations and the work that they do important to you?
So with the CNIB, I like to say that's like that uncle or aunt that's always been there. So ever since I was a youngster, I'd always utilize the services of the CNIB, whether it was getting a CNIB card or going to Lake Joe, or even doing my placement in university and college. It was just always entrenched with the CNIB. So I feel by being an ambassador, I'm actually giving back. And I'm giving back all those times that they were there for me and all the services that they provided me over the years. And then the FBC, I would say 5 years ago is when I started connecting with the FBC. And I fell in love with their organization too, because they connected me to such great people over the years with their programs, with their awareness, with their mission. It just connected with me. So like I like to say all the time, it's a relationship that's sent from heaven.
And what experiences in your life have driven you to want to speak up?
I did not grow up with a role model who looked like me, who was visually impaired and did have dark skin. In my culture, I did not really know anybody who kind of had the same, I guess, barriers that I had as well. So I feel that it's thought that this demographic doesn't exist. You don't really see that many role models or that many people speaking on this perspective. So the thing that really drove me was the fact that I feel like I have a story to tell, and I feel like my story is a little different from the stories that we hear, right?
Yeah, and it's striking me that it adds an extra level of importance and significance for you to be in such a public role now and to be a leader. And in terms of the bigger picture, what impact do you think that ambassadors like yourself can have?
I think we can have a really huge impact. I want to have a day where like you could walk into a store and even ask for assistance with shopping, and they'll be like, "Oh, okay. Like, how's your day? Like, how's everything going?" Or you could tell them about your job or the new place you bought, and them not being surprised because they know that it's possible. Like, they know your potential. So by doing this ambassadorship, it gives an opportunity to show people who do not interact with the visually impaired or blind community that, oh my gosh, like my perception was so flawed and it was so off. It wasn't even close. And I I think, like I said, we have so much power to do it with all the amazing visually impaired and blind individuals out there. So, as ambassadors and as advocates, this is our time. This is our time to flaunt our lives. This is our time to show people that, you know what, living with vision loss is not that bad. I'm living no differently than you. But at the same time, I'm trying to change your mind on how society's structured and how people's perceptions can really hinder us as visually impaired people, not the fact that we have our eye conditions. Cheers to a limitless life and cheers to not holding yourself back, right?
I will definitely cheers to that. Bernard, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me and thank you for those questions. I really appreciate it.
Speaking Up will return. You're watching Speaking Up with host Laura Bain. Kyra Sparks Lucas began her journey as an Easter Seals Nova Scotia ambassador after attending their accessible summer camp as a teen. She's been spreading the word about the organization and their work for the last 6 years. She also loves to travel and blog about accessibility. She's joining me from her home in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Kyra, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Kyra, you've been an Easter Seals ambassador since you were 13. Why did you become an ambassador?
Well, my journey started when I was 13. I went to camp that summer. The camp experience was really meaningful to me because I had the chance to experience a sense of normalcy, a sense of a regular camp experience. So a normal campground would have no ramp, it would have a bunch of tree branches. It just wouldn't be accessible for me to use my walker or my other medical equipment for me to get around. So here, there are ramps in the cabins, the beds are adapted, there's an in-ground heated pool, but also for me, it felt like a sense of hope and like that I can go to a camp that is in a completely accessible space without having to face all those barriers and do regular camp activities like a normal camp would.
And what other Easter Seals programs have you been involved with?
So I've also been in the Next Step program. The Next Step program is to help people with disabilities try to find employment. So I work at the Museum of Natural History, but what I like about the program is you don't go there on your own. You have a job coach for as long as you need it.
Totally. And how does it feel for you to now get to tell people about these programs that were so meaningful in your life?
It feels good because I like to I like that sense of education, and I feel like everybody has a voice to tell, and everybody has a voice to tell their own story.
Is speaking up something that comes naturally to you?
Yes, when I was a kid, I started to speak up for myself, and I was one of those people who really wanted independence and trying to do things on my own. Like I wasn't one of the people that would ask for help first. If I couldn't do it on my own, I would ask for help, but I would at least try to do it first. And my mom has been my biggest role model in helping me to learn all these things and to help me and support me.
What experiences in your life have made you want to speak up and advocate for change?
Because in this world, not everything was accessible. So, like, when I go out in public, it was just like there's no lamps, there's no elevators, there's no accessible bathrooms. So, I had to advocate for myself. And if nobody else would, like, there's not always going to be someone there for me by my side. So I have to advocate. And eventually, everyone with a disability will have to advocate for themselves in some way. Everybody has their own way of advocating for themselves. And just don't be ashamed to speak up, whichever way that might be.
Why did you start your blog, Kyra's Accessible Adventures?
I started my blog because I thought because there's so much barriers from in traveling, like from getting on a plane to having medical equipment to having a bunch of cobblestones. And I just want people to know that even if you are differently abled, you can still travel.
Absolutely, and it's another great way to speak up and advocate for yourself. Kyra, I look forward to reading about your future adventures, and I want to thank you for joining me today and sharing your experiences.
You're welcome.
Speaking Up will return after the break. Welcome back to Speaking Up. Jenna Reed-Cote is a survivor, not a victim. She has spina bifida, and growing up, she experienced bullying along with several health challenges. Now, she's the creator of the Medical and Motivation Health app, a social worker, and an ambassador for the Rick Hansen Foundation. Jenna is joining me from her home in Vancouver. Jenna, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for having me and giving me this platform and this opportunity to work with you guys.
You're an ambassador for the Rick Hansen Foundation. What is it about Rick Hansen's story and the work of that foundation that you connect with?
Is everything about it a good answer? Rick's story is such an incredible one that I look to for motivation and inspiration. And I think that fascination with his story began when learning about the Man in Ocean tour.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if you can tell me what you do in your role as an ambassador.
Yeah, so I get the opportunity to do presentations at schools usually, but it's definitely not limited to that, different organizations. And so I get to give those presentations with the most effective messaging for that group. And then I get to add my own little flair and talk to them about my story and to get them to see what my story has been and what I've been through and what I've accomplished and what I still can't wait to accomplish.
Well, you certainly seem very comfortable in that position now doing public speaking, but I'm wondering if that was always the case.
Far from it. For as long as I can remember, way back, it was in elementary school where I would not be able to get through a presentation in class of my peers. But when Chris Reeve passed away, I really wanted to find a way to share his message, his legacy with people who may have not really paid attention to it. So my mom and I actually worked on a speech. And so I did that in front of 450 people. And I didn't break down crying in the middle. And ever since then, whenever I have the opportunity to talk about something that has that higher purpose and that incredible opportunity to change people's lives again and perspective, it just removes the pressure and the ego from it.
And what experiences did you have early in your life that made you want to speak up?
What made me want to speak up was growing up with spina bifida at a time where, again, there wasn't much exposure to these stories and education on what it means. It creates such division and such isolation. And I went through a lot of bullying growing up, a lot. And it was all coming from a place of non-education. These kids didn't know what it was like, or didn't know what my condition meant, and all they could see was the weakness. They hadn't been taught otherwise. So it created a lot of isolation and a lot of depression, which is really unfortunate, which is another reason why I love being an ambassador, because when I get to talk to kids, kids are my favorite audience to have, which isn't too common for people. But I just see it as almost like a time machine. I get to go back in a way, and I got to mold so many minds so that they would really start to think of, let's say a new classmate joins their class and they're in a wheelchair. And so I wanted them to see the person and not the wheelchair, and realize that there was so much more that potentially could connect them than divide them. I wanted to create a new generation of friends that people like me needed way back when.
I really love that way of looking at it. When you're sharing your story, whether it's with a group of kids or a group of adults, how do you find that balance between talking about the struggles that you've experienced and telling your story in a way that's empowering?
Well, it's been difficult finding that balance, because you don't want to just sugarcoat everything so that it's easy to receive. Life isn't always easy to receive, and there is beauty and gifts in the challenges, in the struggle, and for people to really appreciate the successes. It can't really be done effectively if they weren't aware of all of the times you fell down, but then decided to get back up.
And has it had an impact on you sharing your story publicly?
I didn't really think that it would, but it made me realize after each presentation, after each conversation with people who may be going through similar circumstances as me, that all of a sudden I'm actually able to connect with them on a different level and share my wisdom, and realizing after every single interaction that what I thought was chaos in my life and a period of time I don't want to ever look back on, that is becoming a gift for people navigating it themselves. And so what I wanted to forget ever happened to me, I'm now able to see that benefit for the people that I meet. And it's become such a gift.
Well, Jenna, thank you so much for joining me and sharing about your journey and about your story.
Thank you so much for giving me this platform and for all the work that you do in your own media capacity to, again, highlight people's strengths on the surface and below the surface, and seeing them as people who just want to, accomplish their own milestones, and finding the way to do that based on the cards they were dealt, and being proud of their journey.
Jenna, Kyra, and Bernard are all outstanding champions of change, and we hope their stories have inspired you to stand up for what you believe in. But if you still feel like you need that extra little push, our final ambassador is sure to get you motivated. From 1985 to 1987, he captured the hearts of millions when he wheeled around the world for his epic Man in Motion tour, changing attitudes about what people with disabilities can do. Today, he continues that work through his foundation. Joining me now from his office in Richmond, BC, is one of the most powerful advocates for people with disabilities in Canada and around the world, Rick Hansen. Rick, thank you so much for joining me.
It's an honor, Laura. Thank you.
Do you remember the first time that you spoke publicly about your experience as a person with a disability and what that felt like?
It was a terrifying moment. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty clear on the moment when I was actually a student at the University of British Columbia, and I was entered into physical education. We took an adapted PE course, And my instructor approached me and he said, I really think it would be valuable if you were able to go and just tell your story to your peers. And I was kind of looking at that and going, oh my gosh, I've always been one of the shyest kids in class and head down, please don't ask me. And he's asking me to come up and speak to my peers in front of the class. And I was the only one who had a disability. So I was already isolated and I was terrified. My mouth was dry as sandpaper. I think my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, and I fumbled my way through my story. And what really happened though was, as I started to get into it, I started to relax and ended up concluding with a tremendous amount of positive feedback from not only my instructor, but from my peers. And in many ways, it actually helped break the ice for a number of my peers who really didn't know much about me. They came from different parts of the country and we were in the classroom sharing that together. So that was my big breakthrough moment.
Right. And you've dedicated your life to creating a more accessible and inclusive world. I'm wondering, what has speaking up given to you personally?
First of all, being able to tell your story is a part of the process. If you've had a trauma, it's part of the process of healing. And secondly, whether you've had a trauma or not, it's a chance to be able to give you a voice where your story and your life counts, and to be able to articulate what is important in the context of who you're speaking to, what the subject matter is also incredibly valuable, because sometimes it has very practical and tangible impacts to help create a level of awareness and understanding about living with a disability, and hopefully focusing on ability and maybe even identifying and engaging people to remove barriers that don't have to be there.
Are there specific qualities that make an effective ambassador?
I think first of all, passion. Someone who has a passion to make a difference, someone who is interested in putting themselves out there and being able to share their story, even if they started the way I did, which is from a place of being shy, terrified for that first moment, but you decide you want to be able to do that because it's important to try to make a difference and pay it forward. And then the willingness to learn and to take feedback and to continue to be able to sharpen your story and take that message into so many others. And then lastly is to articulate, we have so many personal interests, is to articulate, being an ambassador is to articulate the common interests that so many are trying to work on, so that when the presentation is over, that there's a bit of a call to action, that the people who you're speaking to can understand that and say, hey, yeah, I want to be part of that, because you now get a chance to influence and bring more people onto the journey.
Well, Rick, it has been an absolute honor speaking with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Thanks, Laura. Well, let's keep going, and thanks for all that you're doing as well.
Host, Laura Bain. Producer, Wendy Purvis. Videographer, Andrew Pickup. Supervisor Media Accessibility, M. Williams. Audio post, Mark Phoenix. Graphics, Andrew Antonello. Senior producer, Michelle Dudas. President and CEO, David Arrington. Copyright 2020 Accessible Media, Inc.